Helping to raise entrepreneurial, free thinking kids. Today, we're joined by Connor Boyack, author of the Tuttle Twins series, which has sold over 6 million copies, teaching kids about economics, government, and individual liberty. He's also the founder of the Children's Entrepreneur Market and president of the Libertas Institute, where he's helped change over 100 laws to expand educational freedom. As a homeschooling dad, Connor brings both expertise and personal experience to the conversation on raising independent thinkers in today's world. Connor, this is going to be a great interview. Thanks so much for coming.
I'm looking forward to it. Thanks for having me on.
You're a busy guy, a very hard worker, and I can sense your mission in what you're doing, because what you're doing is a little bit counterculture, and I love that. So let's talk about the Tuttle Twins. Some of our listeners may not have heard of the Tuttle Twins, but what sparked your idea for that series, and why is it important to introduce kids to topics like economics early on?
The Tuttle Twins at their core teach kids, and frankly, many of their parents as well, about the ideas of human flourishing. What makes for a better life? What builds a better, freer, more prosperous world for all of us? And as you said, I founded this think tank, Libertas Institute, and we're changing these laws and we're trying to educate adults. And I realized that I didn't know how to talk to my kids about these ideas. They were young at the time. I would come home at the end of the day, and I would want to share with them what I was doing to help people and to try and, hey, this business is having this problem with this regulation, and we were able to go help and get that fixed so that they could go, serve their customers better. And I didn't really have a language to talk to my kids about it. So like any parent in my situation, I went on Amazon, and this was in 2013. So I was looking for some books that would help me teach my kids. There were none at the time. So that was the spark that started the Tuttle Twins, its own little entrepreneurial venture. I saw a need. In fact, I had a personal need. I wondered, are there other parents like me who want to help their children understand some of these ideas? I myself was a product of the public school system, and so I didn't learn many of these ideas in school that well, I felt, and so I had to kind of learn them on my own later in life. So I thought, I bet there's other parents out there like me who would appreciate the opportunity to just read fun stories with their kids, but learn some of these important ideas. So now, a decade later, we got over 1 million families using these books. Clearly, the market has responded, and there's all these parents, like I theorized, that really desire to raise critically thinking children. Maybe they're a little bit disillusioned with the school. Maybe they're a little bit disillusioned with the school system and its track record doing that. So we offer them a solution to be able to support them in raising kids who think critically and act entrepreneurially.
It's interesting because as I hear you talk, now my kids are grown. I do have grandkids, and I love what you're talking about. The subject might feel a little too, to some parents, may feel a little too deep. Like, I've got a 6 or 7 or 8 year old. What do they need to know about economics? What do they need to know about individual liberty? And what does that really mean? When you teach those concepts to young kids, do they get it?
This is a very good question, and it's one we got a lot in our early years. We would get some pushback from folks saying, "Oh, let kids be kids.
Mhm.
I'll talk to them about these ideas when they're getting ready to vote, and they're 17, 18, 19 and that age." And I think that's a reasonable initial pushback. Except you have to realize, and I think many parents now do, that their children, even at young ages, are being bombarded with ideas and worldviews and perspectives that may conflict with your own. Parents who are religious, for example, let's say pick a Christian conservative family, they don't think twice about taking their children to Sunday school and doing having little Bible cartoons for kids to teach them those values, right? Those parents are transmitting their religious values and truths to their children, as is their right and their opportunity. Few parents, however, think in the context of, economic truths and principles or civic truths and principles. Hey, I believe this thing about America, or I value, this political principle, and I think that these rights are important. And so parents have often lacked the ability or the know-how to transmit those ideas to their kids. Therefore, they don't oftentimes. And in the meantime, those kids are getting exposed to ideas that the parents might completely disagree with, but the parents aren't aware and they don't know how to engage their kids in conversation. So I think we have to openly acknowledge that children are being exposed to all kinds of competing values and philosophies. Our books are not meant to say, okay, sit down, children, time for textbook instruction to learn about, what the market is or how to build a business. No, boring. Like, kids don't want that. They're just fun storybooks. And so they're reading these fun little stories. And along the way, they're just getting these simplified morsels of an idea. At the end, we offer parents a discussion, series of discussion questions to now talk to their kids about it. But what we're really after is optimizing for the dinner table, as I
Mm,
like to say. We're trying to spark dinner table discussions. So if we're talking in our book about how pencils are made, we have a book about all about how pencils are made. And we share that in a way to say, this is how everything is made. A pencil, even though it's this common, simple pencil, is an extremely complex thing requiring the inner cooperation of millions of people all over the world who often don't even realize they're making a pencil. Think of the guy cutting the tree down. He doesn't know if that's going to become a table or a pencil, right? And he's cutting the tree down with a chainsaw. He has no idea how to make a chainsaw. So he's
yeah.
relying on the chainsaw makers. The chainsaw makers are relying on the people who can smelt, metal ore, and the truck industry that can transport things. We're all so intercooperating, and that's the beauty of the market. So if we're optimizing for the dinner table, we might say, hey, mom, why don't you ask your kids to quiz you on how to make that meal? And it's not just you making it. By the way, it's you rely on a grocery store and the grocer. You rely on people building roads. You rely on the farmer. And this meal that we have in front of us is not this entitled, magically appearing bowl of goodness. Instead, it gives kids, I think, a sense of awe and curiosity and wonder about, oh my gosh, all of that is involved in something as simple as the meal that we're now enjoying. So those are the conversations that we're trying to foster around the dinner table between parents and kids, again, to get them thinking more critically about what we just go through in life and take for granted. Instead, let's spark some of those discussions that can get our kids thinking more deeply.
I love it. I would love to have a dinner conversation about how a pencil is made. Here's what I love about what you do, and here's where I can see some parents giving a pushback. They've given pushback on me. One, I don't want to push religious values on my kids. I want them to make their own choice. And two, I don't know that this is over my kids' head. My husband, every night before our kids went to bed, starting in kindergarten to first grade, read them the Narnia Chronicles. And I thought, this is above their heads. You know what? It wasn't. Kids love to think deeply. And the reason you need to teach your kids your faith and values is because when they're grown up, if they don't know anything, they don't know what to choose from. And I think we have an obligation, like when we teach math and English and writing, to teach these principles to our kids, our faith values, and to teach them to think deeper, because nothing in their environment teaches them to think deeply. As a matter of fact, it teaches them to think on a more shallow level, social media and so forth. And many parents with kids with ADHD say, "What can I do to get my child to just really focus?" He focuses on video games. Of course he does, because everything's moving very quickly. This is exactly the kind of thing, what you're doing, that helps kids with ADHD learn to focus and to think and to slow their mind down. Because if you're really going to think more deeply and more critically, you have to slow the engine down. So I love what you're doing. Um, you talk about your programs being passion driven education, and you emphasize teaching kids by talking about their interests, finding out what your kids are interested in, and then using this approach rather than how a traditional school system would do this. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Let's imagine a silly scenario. Let's say, Dr. Meeker, that your refrigerator breaks down. and you need to fix it. You have all this food that's going to spoil. The frozen things are thawing out quickly. You're wondering, what do I do? I can promise you one thing. At no point in that experience are you going to think, you know what? I am so glad that 10 years ago, when we bought this refrigerator, I read cover to cover the instruction manual for such a time as this,
Yeah,
right?
right.
Like, doesn't happen. No, what happens? You go find the instruction manual and quickly look at it. You pull up a YouTube video about how to repair this refrigerator. You call Uncle Bob, who's handy, and ask him for help, or you call the company, right? And so there are two models in education that relate to this silly example. There is what I call the just in case method. That
Mhm.
is the method our whole school system is based on. And that says, hey, just in case you need to know 30 years from now that the mitochondrion is the powerhouse of the cell, we're going to force you to memorize all this stuff now, just in case you end up in this profession or in this life pursuit. We don't know. So just in case, right? Just in case my refrigerator ever breaks, I need to absorb all this information now. Well, of course, that's not how adults learn. It's not how humans operate. Not based on a just in case model. We all operate on a just in time model.
Mhm.
Just in time for when your refrigerator breaks, you need to know what resources you have at your disposal so that you can make quick decisions, find the information you need at that moment, and then go proceed in your life. And it's the same thing, I contend, with our children. We need to empower them to know where to find information, to be resourceful, not to think, gee, I'm glad I memorized this 13 years ago in class, because very little, if anything, of what they are forced to learn as a kid is going to be relevant to the day-to-day lives and their professions. Instead, we need to empower our children to develop that resourcefulness and find what they need. In doing that, I have found no better way to inspire children, my own and many others who have adopted this educational philosophy, to learn than to use their own interests. If I say to my child, you must write this essay on butterflies because it's in the curriculum and here's what you have to do, right? They're going to resist. They're not going to find joy in it. It's not going to be meaningful. But if my kid is really interested in Minecraft, and I say, hey, I want you to write an essay that talks about a new Minecraft world that you create. Or if you're a Pokemon fan, right? Write me an essay persuading me as to why Charizard is the best Pokemon. And just
Yeah,
having this little
yeah.
hook of,
Mhm.
whether it's skiing or horses or My Little Pony,
Yeah.
pick your interest. When we acknowledge our children's humanity and
Mhm.
we kind of foment their interests and lead them along on what they're already curious and passionate about, it is so much better than saying, hey, some curriculum committee once upon a time decided that every 8-year-old needs to learn all this same information in the same way at the same age. That doesn't make sense. It doesn't jive with how we as humans learn and operate. And so really trying to find ways to more authentically educate our children in ways that we ourselves learn. I'll end with one final point. I believe that context must precede content. The problem with our education system is that it's shoving content into children's brains without any context. When a child raises their hand and says, seeking that context, why do we need to know this? Or how is this going to be useful to me? Or why is this relevant? Oftentimes they're said, put your hand down, it's going to be on the test, right? You are just,
Right.
some curriculum committee said this. It's content, content, content. But when you give a child context, which by the way, their own interests are context,
Mhm.
because when I'm helping my, like, I'll give you an example. My kid was really interested at the time, my son, in Angry Birds, the video game.
Yeah.
And so I had him in a Google spreadsheet track the color of each of the different birds, and we built a little bar graph. I didn't sit him down and say, son, learning Excel is a very important skill in your life, and let's sit you down and have you do Excel 101. No,
Mhm.
boring. I helped him create this cool infographic of something he was already curious about, which he had context for,
Mhm.
and that allowed me to introduce the content. He felt excited to learn this new thing that he could then do for other stuff he was curious about. But we have to pair context with content. If a kid's super passionate about rockets and SpaceX, suddenly they're going to absorb the content of math and physics and so forth far more readily than if they were just, sat down and said, you must learn this. So whether you're homeschooling or whatever your model of education is, it's an opportunity for parents to be a little bit more attentive to what are our children curious about, and just even ask them questions about that and find ways to further educate them using those interests so that they have context as they then acquire the content.
And you not only help your child learn better and deeper, but you get to know your child better because,
Mm.
learning what your kids like and the context and the content that they need, you really learn a lot about your kids. So it's interesting because as you described that, you're sort of describing the way we learned in medical school. There are a lot of things we have to memorize, but it has to be put in context and be interesting, or we're not going to observe it. So that's pretty cool. The
Yeah.
Tuttle twins go to medical school. Let's talk about entrepreneurship. Now, I love this because, my twin grandkids 2 years ago, they're 6 years old, set up a lemonade stand and they saved their money and their parents went through this. And there's so many opportunities for this. But again, a lot of people may think, oh, entrepreneurship and my 8-year-old, that's ridiculous. Talk about what you mean and how you encourage kids to have that hands-on experience in running a business, and what key lessons do they learn?
Yeah, this is such a joyful project to work on. So this is called the Children's Entrepreneur Market. It's a mouthful, children'sentrepreneurmarket.com. And what we're trying to do, let's use your grandchildren and their lemonade stand as an example. It's almost a rite of passage in
Hmm.
American families, right? To have a
Yeah.
summertime lemonade stand experience. We love it. It makes for cute photos. It's a fun memory. But there's one big flaw that most lemonade stands have, and that is that 90% of the time, the kids just sit there
Yeah.
hoping that a car will stop, which means not only are they not making as much money as they otherwise perhaps could, but more importantly, they're not learning very much
Right.
because the learning actually comes from the interaction. How do I get this guy to buy? Can I upsell him, two for the price of one? Can I,
Upsell. I love it.
yeah,
Yeah.
he's resisting this. How do I, do I need a better, is my product not good? I'm getting feedback from the marketplace, such as it is with a few people stopping. You don't really get that with a lemonade stand. So
No.
at the Children's Entrepreneur Market, we flip that on its head. Think of these like a farmer's market,
Hmm.
except they're run entirely by kids. So you could take your grandkids and help set up the booth and get them all situated, but then you would be required to sit back and read a book and enjoy yourself for 3 hours while your grandkids do all the work. They're
Hmm.
counting the money, they're dispensing whatever the product is, they're interacting with customers and answering questions, really trying to empower kids. Now, are we contending that every child needs to be an entrepreneur? No, of course not. But thinking entrepreneurially is something that every child should be encouraged to do and exposed to. Why? What do entrepreneurs, how do they think? How do they act? They're problem solvers,
Hmm.
right? Just like when I had the problem of not finding a book that would help me teach my kids these ideas, I then solved the problem by creating books. I acted
Hmm.
entrepreneurially. So being a problem solver is huge. Thinking critically, right? The
Hmm.
status quo, is this good? What do we need to change? So critical thinking is huge. Developing customer service, thinking about value creation. How can I create value? Oh, hey, my neighborhood is full of weeds. Could I create value for these busy, hardworking adults by offering to pull weeds, and they'll pay me a little bit, but I'm actually creating value for them because now they don't need to go do that and I
Right.
can create that value. So these are things we want all kids to learn, whether or not they end up owning their own business someday. And the tricky, sneaky thing that we're doing here is that we're using what's called the profit motive as a way to get these children learning all kinds of stuff. So what is the
Hmm.
profit motive? It's, hey, I like uh, you know, slime. That's a really popular thing for kids right
It's
now, right?
popular. Yeah.
And I want these 83 cents of slime. Okay, great. You are motivated now. The profit motive is I need to earn money to go buy all this slime. Every kid is looking for allowance and birthday money and, chores and everything because they are motivated. So we use that profit motive to then get kids learning about budgets and product development, booth design, marketing, pricing theory, what net revenue is, how to reinvest in your business, like all of these business and marketing related concepts that again would be boring if you just sat down and said, I'm going to teach you how businesses work. But
Yeah.
now that the kids are hooked because they're earning money, by the way, our average kid at these markets is around 9 years old and earns over $100 at a 3 hour market. This is
Wow.
great for the kids. It can backfire on the parents. After I took my kids to their first market, they had earned, I think, like one was like $87 and the other one a little more. And it was 2 weeks later, and I turned to my son. He was maybe 10 at the time, and I said, "Hey, we got some weeds out front in the little rock path. How about I'll pay you $5 and you can go pull the weeds?" And $5? I can earn way more than that at the at the market.
That's
So
right.
I priced
Yeah.
myself out. So this
Yeah.
year, our goal is 100,000 kids participating in this program around the country. Last year we did 30,000, so we're really scaling up right now. We're going to be in over 1,000 cities in every state. And so really it's just giving kids an opportunity to put these ideas into practice. Schools don't really, they're not set up to
Right.
facilitate programs like this.
Right.
So it's just a fun Saturday morning family thing, again, where your kids can earn some money or have, some practical benefit. But really what we're doing is exposing them to a lot of ideas and knowledge that they're not really going to learn sitting in a classroom through rote instruction. It's more like, hey, if you want to learn surfing, don't read a textbook about surfing.
Right.
Just go get in the water, right? You got to
Exactly.
start
Yeah.
practicing. And that's what we want to do for these kids.
So how can our listeners enroll their kids in this program? They just go to Children's Entrepreneur Market to
Got,
enroll their kids in this. I don't want to call it a competition, but game. If you're talking, or you're trying to get 100,000 kids.
Yeah, so you're right. You just go to the website, children'sentrepreneurmarket.com. We're scaling up heavily this year. So when you register, you'll see, are there any markets yet in my state? If not, you'll be able to sign up to get the email notifications because we're launching a ton of new cities this summer. This program is typically like a spring, summer, fall program, as you might imagine, with the
Hmm.
warmer weather. But where I live, for example, near Salt Lake City, Utah, this year we'll probably do 30 different events all around the broader Salt Lake area, or in Austin, Texas, or Tallahassee, or San Diego, all over the country. We're launching a series, not just these one-off events, but like a series of different events throughout the summer, so that if you brought your grandkids, right, and they had a blast in Michigan, let's say throughout the broader Detroit and Michigan, we do all these events, and they're like, Grandma, we want to do that again. That was so fun. Well, great. Hey, 3 weeks later, we got another, opportunity to come back to the market. So we want to give kids multiple at-bats so that they can, again, continue learning, earn a little more money, refine their skills. Sometimes, we'll get kids who come to the first market. I'll give you this is a real example. Mom was kind of pushy on the kids. Hey, we should do this. Busy mom. She goes to Costco. She buys some like bags of chips and cans of soda to just put out on the table, right? Not a lot of thoughtfulness going into this. The kids suddenly see that the kids at the booths next to them are raking in the dough,
Hmm.
right? And oh, the kid to the left of me has this gourmet boba drink with 30 flavors. Meanwhile, we got cans of 7 Up and Coke, boring.
Right.
And
Yeah.
oh, right over here,
Mhm.
you've got like custom Harry Potter wands, and just the kids get exposed to all this creativity. They see which kids are making money and which products are working. So those kids that first day might hardly sell any cans of soda and bags of chips. That's fine. Our goal is to not help kids make money. Our goal is the learning. So
Mhm.
then they're going to say, "Oh, Mom, next time can we do like homemade cinnamon rolls? You're really good at that. Can we help that? That's going to do better." So that's why we want kids to keep coming back so that they're learning more, they're growing, and most kids do. It's just a huge fun opportunity.
The other thing that you're doing is you're creating a peer group in which the kids fit. They feel like I'm part of this larger community of like minded kids. And they're doing all these cool things, and they're smart kids because they're coming up with ideas. And I'm part of that too. And that's wonderful for kids
Totally.
because they fit somewhere, and it's a great place to fit because they're thinking and doing. Let's turn the corner a bit and talk about educational freedom and parental rights. And I know that you feel strongly about this, and I do as well. Parental rights. You have done a lot of work through Libertas Institute, and you've changed over 100 laws. What policies are shaping the future of education, and how can parents advocate more for their own influence to be heard?
That latter question in particular is such an important one. When I go out doing my public speaking at various conferences, one of the big takeaways that I have is that parents often feel disempowered.
Hmm.
They don't know what to do. Where do I go? How do I stand up? I'm concerned about these 18 things, but I'm just one person. What can I do about it? To which I say, when I have the occasion to respond, this guy that you see on stage who's written all these books and changed all these laws, I was a web developer. I literally built websites for a living. I had no knowledge about doing any of this. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not an economist. I don't have any fancy degrees or anything.
Hmm.
I just said, hey, someone's got to speak up. And so I started speaking up. And of course, as things typically happen, incrementally, I start meeting certain people and learning certain things. And then I grew my influence over time. What I typically tell a lot of parents as a shortcut is there are groups in your state that are aligned with you. Let's say you're concerned about education, choice or parental rights or some of the things that you mentioned. There are think tanks, for example, grassroots organizations working with elected officials. They already have great relationships. If you can go work with that organization, you can be an influence for good in
Hmm.
your community to get these laws changed. One quick shortcut to figure that out, there's a group called the State Policy Network,
Hmm.
and the website is spn.org. And no matter where you live in the country, you could go to spn.org, you go to the directory link, click your state, and it's going to show you who are the organizations working on my state on some of these issues. So that's kind of a quick shortcut to say, who's in my backyard, working on this stuff, trying to help. Why am I so passionate about this? Oh man, there's 18 ways to take that question.
Hmm.
So fundamentally, I would say this. Um, I'll share a story to illustrate. There was a group that recently got together. They spent a year and a half reviewing America's schools, the curricula, the test scores, talking to students, teachers. And just recently, I don't know if you saw this in the news, they published a report. The title of the report was A Nation at Risk.
Hmm.
And in the report, they warned that America's educational foundations were being eroded by a rising tide of mediocrity. And
Hmm.
they warned that if a foreign country had attempted to impose upon America the very mediocre educational performance that now exists, they said, we might have viewed it as an act of war.
Hmm.
As it stands, we've allowed this to happen to ourselves. Now, you and no one listening heard this recently in the news. Why? It's because I fibbed a little bit. This group that I'm referring to did their investigation and published their report in 1983.
Hmm.
Over 40 years ago, the conclusion was that the way that we're raising our children was mediocre. And so when I share this, when I'm out speaking, I say, raise of hands in the audience, who thinks that things have measurably improved in the last 40 years? No one, of course, ever raises their hand because it's a question that answers itself. I am passionate about this because those kids who are deprived of intellectual stimulation and curiosity, and they're subjected to this dumbed down curriculum that doesn't honor their individuality and just treats them like a cog in a machine, those kids become future voters.
Yeah.
And if we care as voters about the future of our country or its present happenings, we need an informed electorate. We need people who understand the past so that we don't repeat its mistakes, right? We all know that quote, those who don't learn from the past are condemned to repeat it.
That's right.
And so as I work with my think tank team and we're out working with elected officials and talking to these people, what we realize is there is profound ignorance. I'll give you a specific example. The test scores recently came out, and I'm not fibbing here, this one was recent. They're called the NAEP scores, the National Assessment on Educational Progress, I believe is what
Hmm.
it's called. And every year they assess fourth graders and eighth graders and 12th graders. And the results, this is about a year old now, The results that recently came out for the eighth graders found that only 13% of them were proficient in American history. 1-3, not 30, 13%. What becomes of a country when the overwhelming majority of its citizens do not understand its history, do not understand its complexity, its challenges, its problems? So, what I am always on the hunt for are what are the education models and systems that are going to produce the best outcomes. If we
Mhm.
want children that think critically, that are intellectually curious, that are self reliant and entrepreneurial, we need to be educating and raising our children in environments and in classrooms that are conducive towards those goals. Now, and so obviously I'm a homeschooling dad, I'm a big proponent of homeschooling, but one thing I would point a lot of parents to, especially the working parents who feel like they can't homeschool, is a new-ish concept called micro schools.
Hmm.
This is born out of COVID-19 when we had what were called at the time pandemic pods, was the nickname that people were using. Micro schools are basically just a teeny tiny private school. And oftentimes there's one teacher, maybe two or three, and it's a great close knit community where you're bonding with the other students. The parents can have some support so that they're not having to homeschool themselves. There are micro schools flourishing across the country. Literally, if you just Google whatever your state and then micro school, or you go on Facebook and you search for groups, there is just this huge increasing network of homeschool co-ops and micro schools and all these alternative things that are offering families improved and elevated educational opportunities beyond, the status quo that we often get in the system. And so I'm passionate about, but I'm also extremely optimistic because I think with all of these opportunities being developed for parents to have and their children to have different choices, and because I think ultimately choice and competition improves outcomes for all of us, right? And so I want to see more choices. I want to see competing educational systems that are trying to attract families and say, no, we're better for these reasons. No, come here, we have better outcomes. That's going to be better for everybody. It's going to decrease costs. It's going to increase quality. And so I get very hopeful thinking about the future as we have more abundance for parents to look around the landscape and say, where do I put my children and whose help can I get to produce a critically thinking entrepreneurial child? And there's never been more options than there is today.
So if you do find a micro school in your area, how do you know that they're using a good curriculum?
That is a great question. So a lot of the micro schools are not accredited like you get in, the traditional system. But what we find is a lot of those systems, and especially the public school system that are using the well vetted curriculum, are producing very poor results. So
Mhm.
obviously, with anything in education, the proof is in the pudding, and some of this requires a little bit of an investment of risk and hope that, hey, we talked to the parents of other kids in the school. Here's what they're telling us about their experience. Their children are happier. They have more free time because they're not just spending hours upon hours doing, homework they don't need to do. So that's a huge thing, is just talking to the other parents about their experience and what they've seen in their children. A lot of the schools will be able to offer, here's our track record, here's assessments, here's kind of the product that the children are creating so that you can verify that. But I think a lot of it is a little bit experimental. We put our children in a micro school for a year. It was great. They got what they needed out of it. After about a year, we're like, hey, we're good. We're going to go to this homeschool co-op instead. So some of it is like just always, just like, going to the grocery store. How do you know that that bag of potato chips you've never consumed is going to be something you like? You don't really know until you try it. So go dip your toe in the water, but then, hey, if you don't like it, there's 18 other choices that you can choose from. So parents never feel like they have to be locked into a system. Give a micro school a chance for a semester and then evaluate it yourself. Is your
Mhm.
child, discovering that they like reading now when they didn't before? That's a huge win. That's not going to show up on an assessment of how they memorized stuff and took a test. But if you can see that your child is more curious and conversational and loves reading, that's a massive win. And then you might say, hey, let's continue using this school because it's producing good outcomes. So it's a lot of just experimentation and being willing to try out different models, and then see for yourself.
I like that because I know a lot of parents feel concerned about their school, and they'll research, is the public school in this area better? Is the private schools, the Christian schools, the Catholic schools, the Lutheran school? And a lot of parents have a lot of concerns about each school. I mean, one thing offers something that the other doesn't. So when you talk about 13% of kids, only 13% of kids knowing um, our history, is that from public schools or is that all schools?
Great
What
question.
is,
That is public schools. Yeah, the NAEP
okay,
score I referred to is an assessment. I should clarify, public and charter, because charter
okay,
schools are ultimately public schools, just with a little bit of a different flavor, but they're still government schools. So it's the public and charter schools that are required to take these assessments, and that's where they get their data. So that assessment does not reflect the private schools and the home schools, for which there's less data because you don't really have these large systems where you can do a lot of statistical sampling and figure that out. But the research that has been done in years past consistently demonstrates that private and homeschool children have increased educational outcomes. In other words, they're learning and retaining knowledge better than their public and charter school peers. But for some parents, again, they can't afford it or that's
right.
not an option. And so, again, there's lots of charter schools. Homeschooling is very cheap. A lot of states are now passing what's called education savings accounts, where you can actually unlock some of the tax money that would be used for your child in public school. And you can get that money and use it for private school tuition or for homeschooling or a micro school. So that's where I go back and say there's so many more choices and opportunities than ever before for parents to kind of be in the driver's seat a little bit more. Not, oh, I went to public school and I turned out fine, and
Yeah,
my parents and grandparents all went, right? It's a
right.
different day.
It's
It's
a
a
different
different
day.
age. And so parents need to be in the driver's seat a little bit. And good thing there's so many different roads they can travel down and choices that they can make.
Mhm. Well, I love what you do. I'm involved in something called the Medical Institute for Sexual Health. And what we've been doing for 20 years is reviewing sex ed curricula from a medical standpoint and making some inroads, because a lot of those programs that are used in public schools are inaccurate medically. And so I love what you're doing. And you can really make a big difference. We only have a couple minutes left, and I would like you to address the mother out there. She works full time. She has 3 kids. Her kids are in public school. And she said, this is all great, but I can't afford to send my kids to private school and I don't have time to homeschool. Maybe she's a single mom. Give her 3 or 4 things to do tomorrow, if you would.
Absolutely. Self-servingly, I would say this is the opportunity and benefit of the Tuttle Twins. These are just fun storybooks to read with your kids at night. This doesn't have to be on top of homework. It's not a separate program, right? Every mom wants to be able to have that bonding evening reading time with the kids. Start there, and you're just going to plant all these seeds of curiosity, right? That are going to spark. The second thing I would say is that whether you homeschool or anything else, right? Every parents, especially the moms, often feel burdened by the feeling that they are primarily responsible for raising and educating their children. But a lot of the parents and the moms feel insecure in their own knowledge. I'm not good at biology. I'm not good at math. How can I help
Exactly.
my kids? So, what I tell the moms is, and this is something any mom can do tomorrow, if not today, all you need to be is a good Googler. If you know how to research online and ask questions, you don't need to transmit all the knowledge to your child. When they say, Mom, I need help, it's, hey, let's go ask ChatGPT together. Or, hey, let's go research online and go to Khan Academy or find a book online. If we can train our children that when they don't know where to find something or they don't know the answer to something, here's what you do to find it out. Just like the refrigerator example, right?
Hmm.
We shouldn't be focused on making sure our children knows all this stuff. We should make sure that they're empowered to know where to go to find the information. So parents, moms need to rewire their brain a little bit and not feel like they need to be the knower of all the things. They instead just need to be good at research, which every mom is good. They just need
Yes.
to realize that's the solution to the problem. The other thing I would say is build a network.
Mm.
So whether you homeschool or not, Facebook groups are great for this. There's a lot of online communities, whether it's through your church, your community. Homeschool groups are often very inviting. So even if your kids are going to public school, they sometimes have social activities and other things. So for the moms, especially the single moms, what I see is often needed is that mom needs a support system of other moms,
Yeah.
right? To lean and rely upon. And some people don't have family that live nearby or a good social system. And so Usually what I'll tell moms is, or parents, but usually it's the moms, it's do a little cottage meeting,
Mm.
right? Have a, just invite people over, start to meet people, make it very informal, do a day at the park and, hey, I'm taking my kids to the park. Anyone want to join? And, you start meeting people that way. Those people become your support system. No matter your educational model, that becomes a huge benefit for the parents in general in their parenting, but also with the education of their children as well. So it doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to be expensive. It doesn't have to be a formal, structured thing. The final thing then to answer is going back to the passion. Like you said, just pay attention to your child's passion, show interest in what they're curious about, ask questions about it. Go to the library and check out books for free that have to do with that topic. Don't make them read all this classical literature is good. I'm not knocking it, but in addition to all of that, right? Check out the book about trains if they're interested in trains, and really lean into what your children are interested in. And I think it's going to make you a better, more attentive parent in general, but it's also going to get your children exploring their curiosities, which means they're going to learn more deeply about those things, and you're going to see that benefit as a parent soon thereafter.
I just wanted to add to that as well. I would encourage parents, don't just go sign your kids up for, the regular things, soccer, basketball, dance, whatever. Ask your kids what they're interested in, and to realize that what you're talking about is a very different approach to child education, and for many kids, a whole lot more valuable. My guest has been Connor Boyack, author of Tuttle Twins series. You have to look it up. He's the founder of Children's Entrepreneur Market and the president of Libertas Institute. Connor, thank you so much for joining me. What's a good website where people can learn more about what you're doing or find your work?
So connorboyack.com is the easiest place to go. If you just Google my name or look me up on social media, it will be easy to find. And I've written 50 books, including the Tuttle Twins. I'll just plug the one that's perhaps most pertinent to your question about that mom trying to do the best for her children. The book is called Passion Driven Education. You can find it on Amazon and elsewhere, but that's a little helper manual to say, how can I get my kids, instead of learning just in case, how can I get them learning just in time? How can I get them thinking critically and entrepreneurially? So passion-driven education is what I would recommend, but connorboyack.com is where you can find it all.
Spelled Boyack, Boyack. Connor, I could talk to you for 3 more hours. This is very inspiring for me. It makes me want to be a homeschool grandmother. But anyway, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Many professionals invest in an executive coach for personal development and a trainer for physical fitness. Now you can hire me, a best-selling author and expert coach, to help you raise great kids. I've over 35 years practicing pediatrics and an extensive experience decoding what your kids need and think about you. I've helped countless parents just like you. You can talk directly with me through private or group coaching. I'll listen and provide a customized plan to help you be the best dad you can be. Sign up now through the link in the episode notes. Your kids are counting on you. Let's make your family's future brighter together.